Hi, it's Keith from the Evangelical Free Church, Stony Stratford, and we're continuing our series of short talks in the Gospel of Luke. And today we come to Luke chapter 22, verses 66 through to 23, verse 12. The focus is now on Jesus and his trials. Trials, incidentally, with three different judges. The judges all have different motives, but they share one common problem. A phrase that's often bandied about is the end justifies the means. But what does that actually mean? Sometimes people use that in a way which is sometimes a bit morally ambiguous. Is it just saying we get what we want? Some people will say, no, it's more than that. It actually means it's working for the greater good. But is that always the case? As I said, we've got three different judges who are judging Jesus here. Firstly, we have the elders, the chief priests and the teachers of the law. Their charge is a religious one. They don't like the idea of Jesus being the Messiah. They keep asking him questions. They're convinced of Jesus' guilt. In fact, in verse 71, they say when he finally replies to them, "Why do we need any more testimony? We have heard it from his own lips." What have they heard? Well, they've heard that he says they are right in saying that he calls himself the Son of God. But the trouble is, it's a foregone conclusion as far as they're concerned. They've made up their minds about Jesus. Back in verse 67, he said, when they ask, "If you are the Christ," they say, "Tell us." Jesus answered, "If I tell you, you will not believe me." So next they bundle him off to see the Roman governor, Pilate. You see, they've got no grounds. They need the Romans actually to foresee an execution or find a charge against Jesus. So now the charge turns political. Basically, they're saying that Jesus claims to be a king. He's opposing Caesar and he's opposing the paying of taxes. To understand what happens next, we have to understand a bit about Pilate. He was the sort of original Roman hard-man governor, but he wasn't a very wise man, and he'd already run afoul of Rome through his treatment of the Jewish people. He wasn't very attuned to their customs, and this at one time had led to a riot. And so Pilate is not sort of too thrilled to see Jesus brought before him at this time of Passover. He usually resided up at Caesarea Philippi. He's come down to Jerusalem for the Passover. And as far as he's concerned, this is another chance for some political fanatics to kick off and another possible riot. And so really he is just annoyed at having Jesus come to him. He can't find anything wrong with what Jesus has done, but the high priests are insisting. Verse 5, he stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and he has come all the way here. This actually gives Pilate a great opportunity to pass the buck. Well, why didn't you say he came from Galilee in the first place? I'll bundle him off to Herod. He's got jurisdiction in those places, so he sends him off to Herod. Herod again has got another motive, another agenda. He just wants to be entertained. Herod's relationship with religion's an interesting one. He's the guy who put to death John the Baptist. And yet we noted when we look at that story that he liked to listen to John. You know, something that was almost like a spiritual interest there, but, in the end, he gave in to his wife when she wanted him executed, although maybe we could say he was almost tricked into it. But that religious spark, or spiritual spark, seems to have completely disappeared. What he wants is Jesus to perform a miracle or do something like that. Verse 8, when Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased because for a long time he had been wanting to see him. From what he had heard of him, he hoped to see him perform some miracle. But Herod's in for a big disappointment. Jesus won't comply. So in the end, verse 11, then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. Dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. The strangest thing here is Pilate and Herod had never really got on, and yet we know actually after that day, perhaps because Pilate had shown Herod a bit of respect in sending Jesus to him, perhaps they had a common cause, they just saw Jesus as a nuisance, they became friends. What was the elders' problem? Well, they'd already made up their minds. Pilate's was, well, this is an annoyance. This is just going to cause me problems if I listen to this man for too long or don't do what the Jews says. What's Herod's problem? Jesus won't do what he wants him to do. In John 14, verse 6, Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, this is the problem. Jesus' message is completely uncompromising. We can't decide what we make of him. These three people did, and they came to a bad conclusion. In the end, what's our problem with Jesus? Have we made up our minds about him? Do we realise actually if we did something, we actually had to acknowledge him in some way? You know, it would mean making a change, so we dismiss him? Are we just someone who sees him as an annoyance? Something about him just annoys us. It's often amazed me how annoyed people get sometimes when the subject of Jesus comes up. What about Herod? Is he just there when we want to look to him? Maybe we pray occasionally. We're looking for him to answer our prayers. We want exactly what we expect from him. But the point is this. Jesus has provided the way back to God through the cross. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father without me, except through me. In the end, here's the problem. Whatever we want to make of Jesus, Jesus is the one who calls the shots. Thanks for listening.